Hello, everyone. My name's Andy. I'm Andy Ebbs. I'm from DoubleTake, or Vision Solutions, based in the UK. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about DoubleTake Share. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of DoubleTake Share before. It's a product that's in our portfolio out of quite a few. We do replication technologies from IBM platform through to the little Wintel. And Share fits in the middle because it allows you to move data anywhere. So I'll just carry on through my slide here. So we're trying to give you a solution that allows to move from data from one database to another in real time as easily as possible. So no programming, it's all graphical user interface and everything. Now this should make things a lot easier when you've got systems running different databases. They might be on different platforms, so we can replicate from, say, IBM to Linux or Linux to Windows. And that allows you to automate a lot of the processes that you might, at the moment, be using manual scripts for. So DoubleTake allows you to transform the way you do business at the moment. So you can break down the barriers between the different databases. So moving data from SQL to Oracle, Oracle to DB2, for instance. You can bring multiple databases together as well. So we have the ability to take data from all sorts of different data sources and consolidate it in one server, or separate it out as well. A lot of time companies merge together and one will have one CRM system, one will have another. You might have Navision, you might have Salesforce. We can move the data between these different databases and consolidate it into the shared one that both businesses use. So we can help you interface between different incompatible databases. And as I said, over different platforms. The way this works is with a graphical user interface. There's an agent on each machine, then everything's controlled from a Windows console. Just a Windows application. So it's just a case of dragging and dropping data generally. So it's fairly straightforward to configure and implement. Sometimes you might want to customize it as well. I'll come back to that in a minute. But it's a fairly flexible, easy to implement solution. And it allows us to transform the data while we're actually moving it around as well. So we might capture data from an Oracle database on Linux, and then we might change the dates and timestamps and so on as we're inputting the data into a target environment. Hopefully giving you better productivity, higher profitability, and we think it's an instant return on investment because a lot of the time you'll be spending a lot of man hours putting these interfaces together by hand. Paying consultants who have expertise in 2 different database types, and they might not know the third one, so you have to employ somebody else to do it. So it's quite an easy way of reducing the overheads involved in merging data together. So there's different things we can do with the product. It's a very flexible tool. We're able to replicate data between different applications, as we were just talking about a second ago. We can keep these databases in sync because we replicate data in real time. We can make sure that when we capture a change on your live server, we're going to insert that same record into the target machine pretty quickly. So that database, the second one, will be in sync with the first. The users can access that data from multiple places and see a live copy of the data, so a current copy of the data. They're not looking at data that was maybe taken a snapshot of an hour or 2 hours or even longer ago. It's going to be consolidated data that's going to be usable. Often, a lot of customers will use DoubleTake to pull data from a group of servers or a central server, which is business critical, and put it to business information for reporting and things like that, and data warehousing, so we can offload the data somewhere else or put it somewhere more useful. And then feeding the data in real time allows us to protect those mission critical applications and provide your website with the latest copy of the data, pulling analytics from different servers in your environment and putting that into a web portal, for instance. Another useful thing that's sort of like a side benefit of DoubleTake Share is often when you're doing test and development, you want to have a live copy of the data, so you know that when you go live with an application, it's going to actually work and the data is going to be usable to you, or the actual processes that you're going to apply to data is going to be usable. So you can take a copy of the data, it's a live copy, you can do all your tests and run an application on what's a copy without impacting the user in production. It's very good for user acceptance testing and so on. Now, DoubleTake is quite a varied product. It allows you to work in lots of different environments, whether that be HP, UX, but also Linux stuff. Lots of different flavors of Linux there as well. Red Hat and SUSE, but it includes CentOS. We'll work with Oracle Enterprise Linux as well. Well, that's not actually on that list. we also do sort of the IBM platforms, because Vision Solutions, historically, you might have come across doing replication between sort of I-Series and P-Series stuff. So we do a lot of the IBM platform. And you can see there's quite a few different databases that we cover as well. So the way the product works is we have this change data capture. Basically, that means we're monitoring the log files coming out of your database for changes. And we capture those changes, and that's what we're going to be replicating over to the target. We only send the changes, so we're very efficient on bandwidth usage and so on. So we're not sending everything. And we can also be very selective, so we don't have to do every table and every database. We can choose just the important data. Our engine automatically handles that extraction. We can then transform the data, so we can change the actual format that it's in, make changes. You don't have to, but you can change and transform the data. So it might be American days of the week into Dutch, or you might change the American date format into a European date format, or change timestamps on things. You can merge fields and things like that as well. And then we push that data into a target database that could be completely different. All the while, we're ensuring that the data that we capture on one end is written in the same order on the target. So we always have that crash consistency. If we capture in a particular order on the source, we're making sure it's committed in the same order on the target. In a simplified diagram of the solution here, we have a source machine on the left-hand side. That would be a production environment. So that machine might be running Oracle or something like that. We have a Double-Take share agent installed on that machine that's going to capture the data as it's coming out. And the bit which is EDMM, that's the Enterprise Data Movement Model, that's like a set of rules that we know to look at that data. We define the data that we actually want to configure. And it analyzes the data coming out of the log files and just pulls the information that we need. And then we're able to transmit it to the target where we have another EDMM, the rules, again, the model that we actually want to use, where we can transform the data before inserting it into a different database at the other end. So it's a very simplified diagram, but it's not that much more complicated than that. I mean, the agent's a Java one as well, so it's a fairly industry standard. It's going to work on all these different platforms. The process ensures that the data is captured in a particular order. It's only moved to the target once it's been committed on the source. Again, that's to make sure that we've got data integrity and the data is going to be crash consistent on the target. So we're not going to lose anything. We don't actually get rid of the data we've copied across until we've actually made sure it's been committed. So we've got a failback position if the server dies or something like that. So we're going to have a usable copy of that data. And importantly, we're not locking any tables or any databases. So the users are still working on the data. There's no freeze while we do the copy of the data. It just keeps ticking on in the live environment. And it's all about ensuring the data integrity. If there's a problem with the connection, we tell you about it. We've got SNMP that allows you to know that there's something going on. We tell the administrator. And when the machines come back online again, the network improves, then we send any data we've been queuing on the live server over to the target machine as quickly as we can, all the while making sure you don't lose any data. So Double-Take's very selective. We can choose exactly what's important, and I suppose that's what's a bit different from ourselves and some of our competitors, in that we can capture data from particular columns. So we don't have to do the whole database. We can choose, just the date column and the name column or something in a database. We can also choose particular rows as well, so it's possible to select just certain rows in a database you want to copy. You might have a few rows at the beginning of a database that are irrelevant data, and we can choose exactly what needs to be copied across. When we then insert that data into the target, I've already mentioned, we can transform it. We've got lots of different ways of doing that. We can change the fields, change the way that the actual data's formatted in the database. We can merge fields together or split them up, and even create new columns based on the data that we've been copying across. So if you want to add two numbers together and put them into the target, very simplified, I know, but we can change the way that data's captured and then inserted onto the target. There's lots of custom things you can do as well. That might need a bit of scripting, but we've got a professional services team that will actually handle the configuration. They can implement it for you, and they can customize it to meet your requirements. I've already said that you can do this very flexibly. So a common way of doing it with Double-Take is going to be a one-to-one type where you've got a live SQL database, you move it to a target Oracle database, and the data goes one way. We might be used for distributing the data. So you might have a particular database going to one target and another database going to a different one. Or maybe it's the same data being distributed around an organization. You can be very selective. You're basically creating a new job or a new EDMM, a new model of how we want the data to be transformed or captured. In a similar way, we can consolidate the data, so pulling data from different databases, different platforms, into a single target machine. And also do this in two different directions. So you might have a database with customers on the left-hand side in this double take two-way share thing, where you're copying the customer database in one direction from a live server to a second server. But on the second server, you might be copying financial data back the other way, where you're working with different sets of data. It is possible with a bit of work, and as long as you've got rules, to do this bidirectionally as well. So if you've got two databases, you can keep them in sync. But we have to be a bit more careful on that sort of thing. Otherwise, you end up with sort of round-robin scenarios. And then also, a lot of customers, once they've used DoubleTake to protect the data or copy the data from a live environment to a data store somewhere else, or Oracle to SQL, they might then use DoubleTake to report to a third server, so we can daisy chain the connectivity between them. So that was the share. And then that one. So as an example of some customers using the product, in this case, the customer had this machine in the middle here, an IBM machine with their production system on it that was very important to them. They used DoubleTake to copy data from that to SQL. And that was integrated with a Rockwell automation system, feeding data into the SQL. And once the data had been transformed and converted and played with on the SQL server, it was then pushed back to the IBM machine in the middle. And then additionally, there was reporting done on it. So we can help integrate production systems of all different sizes and shapes into one workflow. Another one here was a casino where they had multiple databases at different sites located around the States. So they had, they're all sorts of different areas. They were used to communicate back to a central SQL server. In this case, it was IBM to SQL. And that SQL server was then able to analyze that data. So it was a bit of data analytics to work out, which customers were spending how much at different tables and, how much money they might have spent and which machines they preferred. So it allowed them to collate that data. But a very common one I see definitely in my local market is where people have got a big, expensive IBM system that they've paid a lot of money for, and it's a few years old, so it's starting to get quite overloaded with lots and lots of data because data keeps growing and so on. And they just want to be able to run reports on that machine. But every time they run a report, all the users complain that everything slows to a standstill. I'm sure you've seen similar things. With DoubleTake, we would make a copy of that data to a cheaper SQL machine, maybe even just a virtual machine running on a host elsewhere in the environment, just to allow them to run reports without impacting users on production. So those reports are still going to be running on live data, but the actual workload's been moved from their expensive, maybe overworked IBM platform. It allows them to extend the life of that environment as well. Migration's a big thing I'm dealing with a lot of in the UK. I'm working on a lot of international global things. A lot of that's with some of the other products. I'm going to give you a quick overview of those in a second. But migration is something we're doing a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff with a big courier company at the moment, and they've got platforms of AIX, they've got HPUX, they've got lots and lots of Linux, they've got lots of Windows. And some of it we're moving wholesale, we're moving the whole environment. But what they found is they've got really old versions of things like IBM platform, iSeries, and it's not compatible with anything else. So they've got to move that data. There's not like an IBM path to go from that old environment to the new one anymore because they've left it that many years. So they're using DoubleTake to copy the data from that onto newer IBM kit. And where needed, they might even move to SQL and so on. So you might be upgrading your database version. You might be upgrading the actual application that you're using. It might be something like SQL 2005 to SQL 2012, even on a Windows environment. Although I think DoubleTake availability, I'll talk about in a minute, does that better. But there are tools that allow you to move this data between different platforms. You can convert that data as well. You're merging organizations together. You might be switching to a newer version of the operating system, so Windows 2000. It's come up a lot in this big opportunity I'm working with at the moment, where they're running Windows 2000 in some states, but they want to get off 2003. We have the tools to do that. And also consolidation, bringing lots of small SQL servers into a big target SQL server. With newer hardware, we've got VMware and so on. It's easier to consolidate machines and give them more resources on a flexible basis. So we're used for that as well. So I've been talking about double shake share. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. If you have, you can either ask now or we'll wait until the end. But double take share is a very powerful solution that allows you to move data between different platforms, different Windows, Linux, IBM, HP UX, Solaris, and so on. But it is database level replication. I don't know how many of you are Windows. If anybody could raise a hand if you do Windows and Linux. Nobody uses Windows and Linux. So my next slides are going to be fairly redundant then. I don't know how much time I've got left. I've got 5 minutes. But maybe if I show you them, you can maybe understand how we do some of the other stuff that we do with DoubleTake, which is DoubleTake Availability, which is our high availability product for Windows and Linux. It basically captures real-time change on a live server and copies it at a disk level. It looks at the actual, copies it at a file level. We see the individual files. We're able to copy them to a second server where we merge that data, and in a disaster, we can fail over to that environment. We do a DR solution, which allows us to consolidate lots of servers to a single target machine. Great for disaster recovery because you've got a live copy of the data that's maybe only a few seconds out. We don't really care what the application is with these products. And then we have DoubleTake Move, which is purely for migration. It's basically our high availability solution where you fail over and you have no intention of going back the other way. I've got a slide here which explains the engine a bit better, and I do know this product a lot better than the share one because it's one I do lots and lots. It's again in that opportunity I'm talking about with distribution. These guys have got about I forget the number. I think 7,500 machines potentially that need to migrate, and most of that's Windows and Linux. And we're involved in this already, having done a few hundred, and we're hopefully getting the rest of them as well. And Microsoft uses technology for 4,500 machines. So it's a very scalable technology. On the left-hand side, I've got a production server, and we have an agent running in the operating system capturing real-time byte-level changes to the actual file system. So we see changes to Windows operating system files, we see changes to SQL data, we see changes to Oracle or whatever is running on that machine. We don't care what the hardware is, so the cool thing with this technology is it'll move data from a Dell machine to IBM or IBM to HP, but also physical to virtual, virtual to cloud, cloud back to the physical as well. And I've been talking to a lot of people today about cloud to cloud type replication. So you're not tied into a particular cloud vendor anymore. You can move your data in real time somewhere else, either for migration or high availability. But the way that this solution works is we have an initial copy of the data. I'm sorry if I had lasered anybody in the face. We copy an initial copy of the data we want to protect. So that could just be individual databases or log files. It could be the whole system state. And then when we copy that data across, we see the real-time changes as well. So every time somebody modifies a file, we see a few bytes worth of change. We capture those changes in real time, and we're going to send those over to the target machine as quickly as the bandwidth allows us to. Now, both this replication and mirroring work at the same time, and it means that we've got a live copy of the data. As soon as the mirror is completed, at any point you want to fail over, we're just going to replicate the byte level stuff, and we're ready to cut over to the target. It's also very useful for, I suppose I'll animate the next bit here. So we always make sure we write the data to disk, so we've got consistency, and then we send it as quickly as we can. But we're doing both processes at the same time. So once the data's in sync, we're just trickling the byte level stuff ready to fail over or cut over for migration. A little bit more on this slide here. We handle things like queuing of data. So if we can't send the changes immediately, we'll queue them on the live server in memory or to disk. And we can queue, days worth of data if need be. But it means we can work on very slow links with this product. DoubleTake Availability has been probably available for about 20, 25 years now. So it used to work on things like ISDN links. So when you give somebody a gig link now, it's perfect for us, and we can move terabytes and terabytes of data and keep it in sync in real time. When we send the changes, we make sure they're written in the same order on the target. So again, just like the Double-Take Share product, it's all about crash consistency, keeping a live copy of the data that we know that it's going to be usable in a disaster. So even if there was data queued on the live server when it failed, the data on the target, because we've kept the log files and a database in sync with each other, is going to be usable. And you won't have to do an integrity check or anything when you fail over. Now, when we do actually get the replication between these machines, we have different ways of fail over. And I've just got, it's the last couple of slides, and I think I've got enough time to cover them. The first method is what we call full server replication. And in this scenario, we have two replication sets. We have a system state one, which allows us to copy, I suppose two screens here, I don't know who I should be pointing out to. We have a system state replication, which allows us to copy the Windows files, the program files, copy the user directories, and so on. We copy those to a temporary directory on the C drive of the target machine, or a mount point in Linux. And we keep a live copy of them, so every time you patch or hotfix or service pack that machine, and you're putting a copy of the, making changes at a byte level to system files, we see those changes, we copy them across, and we apply them to the files in this temporary directory. Now, this temporary directory is on this target machine. In this case, it's called DRO1. DRO1 is just a plain Windows server. It doesn't have any applications on it. The only requirement is it's got the same operating system. So if, it bears us BlackBerry Enterprise, so I'll probably update this slide at some point, but we don't care what that application server is. We just build a target machine with a plain OS, and we're copying the system state into this target directory and keeping a live copy of it. Or the application data goes to the same location on the target, same path. So if it's on the E drive on the source machine in a data directory, it goes to the same data directory on the E drive on the target. And we maintain a live copy of it, just as I was talking about earlier with the same engine. When something happens to your live server, or if you want to do a migration, you shut down the live server, then Double-Take's able to take the data from that staging area, and we overwrite the plain Windows operating system. And we do that, it probably takes us about 5 or 10 minutes. Depends on the speed of the OS and how big the actual operating system itself is. But we're going to apply those changes by moving them from the staging directory over the top of the plain Windows files. Obviously, we're changing system stuff, so we need a reboot. But when the machine is rebooted, it's a clone of the original server. So it has the same host name, security ID, same applications, hotfixes, service packs. It looks like the same server with the same configuration. So when the users connect to it, because we can actually change network settings and so on as part of this as well, but when the users connect to it, they think they're talking to the same server. It looks like the same server, it's got the same applications, it behaves in the same way. I mean, if you look at the server itself, it's even the same desktop icons. The key thing here as well, we can actually exclude data. We can use this to change the network, so we can keep the source machine's network, or we can change to a different one. So if we're going to the cloud, for instance, you'd keep the cloud machine's network. But then we might update the DNS records for them. We could do all that automatically. And if you've got time to have a look at it at some point, Double-Take availability or Double-Take move, it's very straightforward, very simple to implement. There's another workflow that comes with availability and move, and that's what we call full server to Hyper-V OSX. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, virtualization in the Windows platform and Linux as well, it's become really big. And 10 years ago, it was a product we developed here, which is called VRA, so it's been around for a little while, it's very compatible, to take advantage of the tools available when we go virtual. What this allows us to do is, I don't know which screen to point at, I'll give you guys kind of this side, this one. So I've got a VRA helper, which is it's a Windows machine running on an ESX platform. And the VRA helper is basically just plain OS, a copy of Double-Take installed on it. It's very simple to configure, there's nothing fancy about it. We then have a workflow that looks at each of these source machines. So I've got source 1 and source 2 there. Those source machines could be physical, they could be virtual, they could be in the cloud. They could be running any version of Windows, or if we're doing a Linux product, we have a range of Linux operating systems we support. But essentially, as long as they're a supported OS, we don't care what the storage is, what the hardware is, virtual or physical, what network they're on, where they're located. All we need to know is that they're a supported OS. And they've got Double-Take installed on them. We look at each machine using the VRA helper, and then we create these replica virtual machines. So we basically create the VMX file, we create the VMDK files, the virtual hard disks, and we put them wherever you want them on the target ESX host you want to go to. And that's a automatic process. They're created, and then they stay offline. So we're not using resources apart from the disk space that you've allocated for the virtual hard disks. Now, what DoubleTake's able to do is then take these VMDK files from this source machine, attach them to the VRA helper as Windows mount points or virtual SCSI devices, and then Windows mount points. And then we can copy data from, say, the C drive on source 1 through the mount point on the VRA helper straight into the VMDK file. And we do that in real time, in byte level. We get the data in sync, and then in a disaster, you're ready to basically start up the replica virtual machine. Now, I could go on and on about this solution. I'll do an awful lot of it. So if anybody's got any questions about this or any of the other stuff, I think I'm sort of running out of time now. And that's a bit on my PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Are there any questions for Andy? Anyone? Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So a lot of the tools that you have are designed to copy data, right, from one platform to another.
Correct.
Isn't big data too big to copy?
I don't think so, because we can choose just parts of it. We don't have to do the whole thing. But we're very used to working with terabytes and even petabytes of data. We have customers through military, through casinos we're talking about, where they're capturing large amounts of video data and bringing that to a central point. I mean, our customer base includes, you name the bank, they're going to be using DoubleTake, whether it be HSBC or Barclays or any of the Bank of America type ones as well. Big in police forces, we're big in hospitals where they have things like CAT scans and so on, where they're collecting all that sort of data as well.
But not too big to move, not too big to copy. All right.
As long as you've got the hardware.
Okay. Anyone else question? No? Then thanks very much, Andy.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.